Good morning, dear students. Today we shall begin with the third part of the chapter Demand. In the previous part, you had studied about demand schedule, demand curve, and slope of demand curve. So the topic for today is determinants of demand, which is also known as demand function. So demand function shows the relationship between demand for a commodity and its various determinants. So demand function shows the relationship between demand for a particular product and all those aspects on which that demand depends. So there are two types of demand function, that is individual demand function and market demand function. So let us begin with individual demand function. Individual demand function shows how demand for a commodity by an individual consumer in the market is related to various determinants. So this demand function deals with demand for a commodity and the various determinants or the aspects on which that demand depends for an individual consumer. So all these determinants are related to individual consumers. So the formula for individual demand function is dx is equal to f within bracket px, pr, y, t and e, where dx is equal to quantity demanded for a commodity, px is own price of commodity x, pr is equal to price of related goods, y is equal to consumers' income, and t is consumers' taste and preferences. E denotes consumers' expectations. So we shall study all these determinants in detail. The first one is own price of commodity. Other things remaining the same, with the rise in its own price of the commodity, its demand contracts, and with the fall in its own price, the demand extends. So in the very beginning it says other things remaining the same. It means that all the other determinants are expected to be same, and when all those are same, whenever there is a rise in price of a commodity, its quantity demanded falls, and whenever there is a fall in the price, quantity demanded or demand increases, it extends. The second determinant is price of related goods. Now all those goods whose change in price affect the demand of other goods are considered to be related goods. Whenever there is a change in the price of one good which is having an effect on the demand for another good, all those are considered to be related goods. And unrelated goods are those when there is a change in a price of one commodity which is not leading to change in demand of the other commodity. Those are unrelated goods. So over here, price of related goods are very important. It is one of the determinants. So demand for a commodity is also influenced by change in the price of related goods. Whenever there is a change in price of related goods, demand also varies. Now related goods are of two types. The first one is substitute goods and the second one is complementary goods. So let us understand what these two types of goods are. So substitute goods, these are the goods which can be substituted for each other. An increase in the price of one causes an increase in the demand for the other, and decrease in the price of one causes decrease in the demand for the other. So substitute goods are those goods that can be used in place of another. Okay, for example, if you want a burger, you can purchase it either from McDonald's or Burger King, or there are various other options. If you are willing to have a very sweet dessert, a cake or donut, you can purchase it from various shops. Okay, and your craving for sweet can either be fulfilled by cake or donut. If you want to commute from one place to another, you can reach to your destination by car and also by train and even by bus. Okay, if you want something cold to drink, you can either choose Pepsi or Coke or any other cold drink. If you want a hot beverage, you can have tea or coffee. So all these are substitute goods, the goods that can be used in place of another. Okay, if a person is willing to have cold drink, he or she can choose either Pepsi or Coke. So both are substitute goods. They can be used in place of one another. So suppose there is an increase in the price of Pepsi, then people are going to think that why should we spend more in order to get Pepsi? In place of Pepsi, they can consume Coke. Okay, so whenever there is an increase in the price of one good, it causes an increase in the demand of the other. Okay, if there is a fall in the price of Pepsi, people are going to prefer to purchase Pepsi, and they will limit their consumption of Coke. They would not prefer purchasing Coke. Okay, so whenever there is a decrease in price of one commodity, it leads to decrease in the demand of another. Okay, now another type of related goods are complementary goods. These goods are those goods which complete the demand for each other and are therefore demanded together. In case of complementary goods, a fall in the price of one causes increase in the demand of the other, and rise in the price of one causes decrease in the demand of the other. So complementary goods are those goods which are used together. For example, toothbrush and toothpaste, petrol and car, tennis racket and tennis ball, bread and jam. So all these commodities, all these products are being used together. So whenever there is a fall in price, suppose there is a fall in the price of petrol, people are, they will be willing to purchase more of car. There will be increase in the demand of car. Okay. And whenever there is a rise in price, it causes decrease in the demand of other. For example, if there is a rise in price of petrol, it will lead to decrease in the demand of cars, because people are going to think that they need petrol in order to run their car, and since petrol has become expensive, it will become an expensive affair to maintain a car, and as a result they might not demand car. Okay, so these are complementary goods. Now, substitute goods, there is this example. I'll read it out. Whenever there is a rise in price of coffee, there will be a decrease in demand of coffee. And since tea and coffee are substitutes for each other, there will be rise in demand for tea. On the contrary, when there is a fall in price of coffee, people are going to prefer to purchase coffee. So there will be an increase in demand for coffee, which will lead to decrease in the demand for tea. So this was an example for substitute goods. For complementary goods, whenever there is a rise in price of car, there will be a fall in the demand of car, which will lead to fall in the demand for petrol, because these two are very much related to each other. Now, on the contrary, whenever there is a fall in the price of car, it will lead to increase in the demand of car, and it will also lead to increase in the demand for petrol. So this was about complementary goods, and whenever we see one good, or rather the price of one good affecting the demand for another, this entire effect is known as cross price effect, and we are able to see cross price effects in two types of goods, that is substitute goods and complementary goods. So, a difference between substitute goods and complementary goods. Substitute goods are those goods which can be interchanged for use. They can be used in place of another. Complementary goods are those goods which complete the demand for each other, which means that they cannot be used separately. They are to be used together. The second point is, when price of a substitute good increases, the demand for a good, say good X, rises, and vice versa. That is what we saw. Now over here they're saying, when price of a complementary good increases, demand for a given good, say good X, falls, and vice versa. Now there are few examples for substitute goods. The examples are tea and coffee, because they can be used in place of another. Pepsi and Coke, again it can be used in place of another. Ball pen and ink pen, both are pen. So the consumer can substitute it. If they prefer to use ink pen, but ink pen's price is rising, then they can switch on to ball pen. Now, the example of complementary goods are pen and ink. You need ink in order to use pen. Bread and butter, these two go together. And car and petrol. So, this was about the difference between substitute goods and complementary goods. The third determinant is income of the consumer. Change in the income of the consumer also influences his demand for different goods. Now, whenever there is a change in the income of a consumer, his demand also changes. If income rises, demand rises, and if income falls, demand falls. But there are two types of goods. That is normal goods and inferior goods. So let us study about them. The demand for normal goods tend to rise with increase in income and vice versa. Whenever there is a rise in income, there will be increase in demand, and whenever there is a fall in income, there will be decrease in demand for normal goods. Okay. Now, normal goods are all those goods that we purchase on a regular basis. Okay. But inferior goods are those inferior quality products that a person is forced to use due to lack of money. Okay. So in case of inferior goods, there is a different kind of trend that is seen in demand. So on the other hand, the demand for inferior goods like coarse grains tend to decrease with increase in income and vice versa. So whenever there is an increase in income, the person would not like to consume inferior goods. So due to increase in income, there will be a fall in demand for inferior goods, and whenever there is a fall in income, there will be an increase in demand for inferior goods. Okay, so inferior goods are all those low quality goods that an individual is forced to use. Now over here, this is showing you as to what is the relationship between normal goods and the income. So in case of normal goods, there is a direct relationship with increase in income, which is denoted by Y. There is increase in quantity demanded, or rather demand. With fall in income, there is fall in the demand. But there is an inverse relationship in case of inferior goods. Whenever there is increase in income, there is fall in demand for inferior goods, and wherever there is fall in income, there will be increase in the demand for inferior goods. Now this is the difference between normal goods and inferior goods. Normal goods are those in case of which there is a positive relationship between income and quantity demanded. Other things remaining constant, quantity demanded increases in response to increase in income and vice versa, and this is what we just now saw. There is a direct relationship. Inferior goods are those in case of which there is a negative or inverse relationship between income and quantity demanded. Other things remaining constant, quantity demanded decreases in response to increase in consumers' income and vice versa. Okay, so this is what we saw. There is a negative or an inverse relationship between income of the consumer and inferior goods. So the second point is income effect is positive. So there is a positive relationship between demand for normal goods and income of the consumer. But in case of inferior goods, income effect is negative. With rise in income, there is fall in inferior goods. Normal goods may or may not be essentials of life. So it is not necessary that normal goods are going to be an essential of life. It may also not be a very important product. Inferior goods are essentials of life. In other words, people buy inferior goods largely because these are essentials of life, like coarse grains and coarse cloth. So inferior goods include all the essentials of life, which is very, very important for an individual to lead a normal life, and as a result, every individual has to get it. So in whenever there is a lack of money, they can opt for low quality version of those products, but they need to have it because those are essentials. Like if good quality grains are not available, they can purchase coarse grains. So the fourth one is, in case of normal goods, there is always inverse relation between own price of commodity and quantity demanded. So there will always be inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Whenever there is a rise in price, consumer may not consume the product or consume lesser amount of product, which is also called law of demand. We will be dealing with law of demand in the later part of the chapter. In case of inferior goods, there may or may not be an inverse relation between own price of the commodity and the quantity demanded. So in case of inferior goods, which are also essentials of life, there may not be an inverse relationship. Whenever there is a rise in price, it is not necessary that the quantity demanded is going to reduce, because those are essentials of life. So in this case, law of demand fails. The next determinant is taste and preferences. The demand for goods and services also depend on individuals' tastes and preferences. If an individual likes a particular commodity, that individual is going to demand for that product. So the second point is, it can be influenced by advertisement, climate, new inventions, etc. So these tastes and preferences are influenced by the producers through advertisement, or sometimes climate also plays a new role. And if there is a new invention, people get attracted to those new products. So taste and preferences vary. Other things being equal, demand for those goods increases for which consumers develop strong taste and preference, and vice versa. So other determinants need to be constant, and if there is only taste and preferences which is playing a role, there will be change in demand according to these tastes and preferences. When taste and preference is in favor of a particular product, its quantity demanded is going to rise. And if a particular product is not being favored by an individual, the quantity demanded will fall. The next determinant is expectations. If the consumer expects a significant change in the availability of the concerned commodity in the near future, humans decide to change his present demand for the commodity. If there is a particular commodity whose price is high than usual, even then a consumer may they may purchase it, they may prefer to have it if they expect that the price is going to rise all the more in future. So expectations are also one of the determinants. Now the next part is market demand function. Market demand function shows how market demand for a commodity is related to its various determinants. Now, I have already told you that market demand is basically an aggregation of individual demand. And market demand is also, related to various determinants. Now, the formula for market demand function is F within bracket Px, Pr, Y, T, E N, Y, D and S, where dx is equal to market demand for commodity X. Px is own price of the commodity. PR is price of related goods. Y is equal to income of the consumers. T is taste and preferences of the consumer. E is expectations of consumers. N is population size or the number of buyers. YD is distribution of income, and the last one is season and weather. So PX, PR, Y, T and E have already been discussed in case of individual demand functions. Just now we have discussed it, and all those determinants are the same, and it also falls in market demand function. Apart from this, there were few new determinants that came in this market demand function, and the first one is population size or the number of buyers. Demand increases with increase in population and decreases with decrease in population. So whenever there will be more number of people, the demand is going to increase, and whenever there is lesser population, demand will also decrease. On the other hand, composition of population is also very important. For example, when female population increases, demand for goods meant for women will go up. Okay, but if male population increases, demand for goods meant for male will rise. So composition of population is also important. Distribution of income. Market demand is also influenced by change in distribution of income in the society. If income is equitably distributed, there will be more demand. If income is not equitably distributed, there will be less demand. So distribution of income is also very important. If there are few number of very rich people, they will not be demanding more of a particular product. But if the income is equitably distributed, it will lead to more demand. The third determinant is season and weather. Seasonal and weather conditions also affect the market demand for a commodity. For example, during winters, demand for woolen clothes and jackets increase, whereas market demand for raincoat and umbrella increases during rainy season. So season and weather is also a very important determinant. We do not purchase woolen clothes during summer season. We will demand for it only during winters when there is a need of it. Similarly, raincoats are not purchased throughout the year. It will only be demanded during rainy season. So today we have studied about demand function. There are two types of demand function: individual demand function and market demand function. Individual demand function has got 5 determinants, that is price, own price of the commodity, price of related goods, income of the consumer, taste and preferences, and expectations. Market demand function includes these 5 determinants, and along with it there are 3 new determinants that have been added. The first one is number of buyers, the second one is distribution of income, and the third one is season and weather. So these are the assignment questions. The first question is explain the meaning of inferior goods and give example. This is a very easy question. The second one is, what is market demand for a good? You need to explain what is market demand. Explain the factors determining market demand. So you need to explain each and every determinant of market demand along with it. So that is it for today's class. Thank you.